spent decades in Egypt and Ethiopia and Sudan looking at the ancient artifacts and the ancient objects left behind that our people left behind in stone. Messages for the future, snapshots in stone about who they were, and messages that have been there waiting for the future for us to retrieve. I invite you to come with me to the Blue Nile, to come with me and see the pictures in Sacred Nile that shows our legacy as a people of faith-making. This book, Sacred Nile, will change how you see history, change how you see yourselves, and change how you see the sacred agency of people who look like us. Come with me from Ethiopia to Egypt. Travel the Nile, travel the history, travel our place in time. Sacred Nile is the book that you've been waiting for. The beautiful lagoon city of Abidjan. Nice to be talking to you.
Nice to be talking to you too, Chester.
So I'm glad you got a chance to take a look at my work. You know, I've been on this road for many, many decades, and it's been a good road. And I'm so glad that I've been able to see this finish. You know, I don't know if this is surprising to you, but working on this book over I guess, using 2 or 3 different agents, I'd been turned down by 40 publishers. And I said, well, you know, that's too bad, but this work has to get out. So this is my first self-published, my second all-color book, but the message, the mission, and I think that's what we African-American photographers are faced with. What drives us, what's motivating us is the mission to tell the story of our people that nobody else could tell, and to bring light to our stories so that we can own them, and so that the people who see those images can own it and gain the confidence from ownership, so that we can then free ourselves from the barrage of bullshit that we have to go through every day from our enemies.
No, I mean, Chester, I don't think most people know, and I don't know if you remember, when we first met, the way I came across you was that in the Howard Library, there was your book, Feeling the Spirit. And at that time, I was a young student. And I remember when I came across your book, I was like, who is this guy? And, you know, I was struggling for a while because I was obsessed with black and white photography. And then when I came across your book, I was just like, then it's a definite stamp for me that I can continue my black and white obsession. And then we met at the Smithsonian. I don't know if you remember that either. And I was really young, and I went up to you and I said, sir, can I have your phone number? I'm a young photographer. I would like to show you my work, you know, and I even think I still have your house number. And that's how this relationship started. And to just go in a little bit further than that is that, you know, when I'm teaching my students, I use you as an example of, because as you know, in Africa, a lot of the information, you know, we have to create sort of these bridges between the diaspora and the continent. And photography is that tool. But I always find it that for a lot of the young photographers, they are studying sort of not photographers that, you know, for example, to me, all my mentors, including you, were African-American photographers. As you know, Dudley Brooks and even Harley Little, who played such a pinnacle point in my career. And so when I came to the continent, I became sort of one of those unicorns where I realized that I had sort of the global view of the image of the Black person, if you understand what I mean. So in that sense, the fact that you continue to publish, and I'd like to say congratulations to you. I can imagine how difficult it is. And the thing that I teach the students is the importance of publishing. You know, it's not just about exhibiting your work. It's not about just showing it now, especially online or on Instagram. You have to really make a book, because your book becomes your history. And I believe for you, you're not only teaching us through your books and through your images, but also you're leaving behind a history for the next generation. And there's such a big value in that. So when I went through the book, you know, some of the things that popped out for me was I mean, it takes a great deal of dedication. It's a very thorough look into this history that most people didn't even know. I didn't even know that there was pyramids in Sudan until I met you back in the day. Most people don't know that there's actual pyramids in Sudan. And granted, I've traveled to South Sudan. I've been to Egypt. I've spent time in Luxor. Obviously, I come from Ethiopia. And having this book really define that we're actually cousins. And I think with these politics, we forget that there's so much that brings us together. You know, we have more things in common than we have things that are different.
Right.
So I want to thank you for this accomplishment. It means a lot. Not just me, as your, biggest fan, but I think for the future generation of my country and also the region, we need to have more of these things in existence. And this is why it was very important to me to have this conversation with you. I feel deeply honored. But I've gone through the book, and there are a lot of intersecting points, and I hope that this is not just the final thing, that this will continue into also something much broader, for example, including something like this in education, and letting people understand that the Nile doesn't just belong to Egypt. It actually belongs to everybody.
Thank you. And one of my dreams, and it's been a dream of many African Americans, and starting with W.B. Du Bois, is that there be an African press, that we need to control the information, and but not just about controlling it for the sake of trying to keep people out, but obviously it's been proven by past behavior that unless we control it, the essential information about who we are and our contribution to humanity and society would never be told. And it's our responsibility to tell it. And I agree with you about encouraging people to do the books, because then that documentation becomes something that other young students who are looking through the library or who are looking through something, they may also come across a book, and it opens their eyes like it opened yours, and say, "Hey, wow, I'm not out here by myself, and look what I'm learning, and I want to be a part of this, and this speaks to me in terms that no other work has ever spoken to me."
Yeah,
So, go
sorry.
ahead.
No, I think, this is the reason, I came back to Ethiopia in 2007, because I realized as Africans, we have been at the mercy of media. We have been at the mercy of the cliche image. And it didn't make sense for me to remain in New York or to remain in the West if I was going to have these conversations. And I think where I stand now, there are more storytellers, there are more photographers than we've ever had, sort of offering, changing that discourse of what is the visual aesthetics of Africa. What does Africa look like? Because most people still don't know. When you say Africa, what comes into mind is just the same cliche that we've seen in the media, but the complexities, the richness. I mean, we are the cradle of humanity at the end. The beginnings start with us. But these are things that we have to enforce, and we have to take that responsibility. I'm not really into complaining of what doesn't work. I'm really about finding solutions. And that's why teaching became such a relevant part of my career, because I realized what you gave me is something that I also now have to transfer to the next generation. And now we're at a position where those that I have taught now have started teaching the next generation after them. And this is so important. And if you remember, even when I exhibited your work in the first Addis Photo Fest in 2010, I mean, that was such a big thing for me. And it was something that, we needed to create these bridges, because there is a big disconnect, I think, of everyone understanding, regardless of who you are, what exactly is Africa and what is its history outside of the history that's been written by others. And that's why your book, I find it to be so relevant that, we're not here talking about a fantasy. We're here talking about facts, and facts that have been hidden for so long that are rarely mentioned. I mean, when I go to Egypt, I'm so surprised how they don't know nothing about Ethiopians, and they don't realize, we have a rich culture. We were one at one point, and this is what I think the role of storytellers needs to be, an artist, is that we have to advocate to find the truth and to be able to share that truth. And that's why I think a book like yours is so important, because it's quite thoroughly done, and I can see your juxtapositioning. I can see you bringing together things that are similar. Even you have like a section of, there was a section about the half crescent moon.
Mm.
These symbols exist everywhere,
Right.
starting from Yeha time. They're very, even when you look at, most people don't know, we have obelisks in Axum.
Right.
There's all these connecting points that you cannot deny that it comes, from one beginning. And that's why I find it very frustrating, like when, I don't know, Europeans say, all these structures were built by aliens and spaceships, because they find it hard to believe that, I find this almost idiotic, and it's quite surprising. And even looking even further, imagine all these things were built without electricity. That's mind blowing, these structures. But everything was not an act of vanity. Everything was a manifestation of spirituality at the end. And that's how connected we were spiritually. I find that in this generation, we're so disconnected from it. But imagine spirituality was what was leading all these innovations, all this creativity, and all these amazing structures that they still can't figure out how did they build this thing.
Right. Right. Yeah, what's alien to the aliens is what's alien to their mind, to the white mind. And the white mind cannot get into spirituality or have a dialogue with nature. That's why they keep, the governments have always continued this process of re-editing and trying to edit the spiritual works called the Bible. But as you say, unless you have evidence to show people, and photographs is the best piece of evidence, people won't know then that they should stand and sort of reconsider the past things that they think they know. I tell people from this book is that what I've come to understand is that the Bible that we have is simply book 2 and 3. It's not book 1.
Exactly.
Book 1 is the book of Amen. Amen is the top god of African people, of Egyptians, of the ancient Egyptians who called themselves Cometians. And I understand your feelings about the Egyptians there today, because the Egyptians there today came in the 6th century. They're the Arabs who conquered the place. They called themselves Egyptians, which is fine. But the African people never called themselves Egyptians. They called themselves from the country Kemet, Black Land, and Kemet you, the people. And that's why I put in the beginning of the book, let's go back to the glyphs. Let's go back to the language of the people before it gets corrupted by whatever European or Arab group and stuff that's there. But you know what's interesting I found about Egypt is that it's the one country in the world where the living exists side by side with the dead. And the dead refuse to go away, because the dead left humongous, this is the ruins of what was left behind. And the ruins are still so monumental, and they take up and command the landscape. They will not leave. I tell people the only reason the pyramid is not in England is because it was too heavy to move. They would have stole that too, whatever they could steal. And the thing, but so not only do they steal stuff like they stole the Bible, but they plagiarize the Bible, politicize it, and use politics to demonize the very people they plagiarize. But nowhere in their history have they been able to develop anything comparable as a sacred text. That is something that came from our people, because our people had this dialogue with nature, this dialogue with the spirit world. And our people, the only people, not only to develop this whole map of the afterlife, but to give God a name. And then I tell people, look, the world before Genesis, the African woman reigned supreme. Yes, you had the male entity of the sky, Amun, Ra, who was saying, the active force, the activization of nature. But behind Amun Ra came from somewhere. Amun Ra came from the woman that we call Nut. I know the English like to spell it N-E-T, N-U-T, but think of it as N-W-T, because this is how Nut worked. The ancient people left behind photographs. We deal in photographs. They left behind photographs on their temples, in their tombs, and they took their concepts and they reduced them to pictures. And one of the most famous concepts to speak to the supremacy of the woman is this: you have an image of a woman hovering over the planet in a downward dog position across the equator. Her arms are in the west, so that she receives the setting sun, takes it into her body, and overnight she regenerates the sun. She replenishes it, and she has a dress with holes in it, and that's how we see the stars. And because her feet are planted on the east, she gives birth to the sun in the morning. That is the concept of continuity. That is a concept of deliverance. So the black sky, heaven, the Egyptians made very obvious from the beginning that heaven is the body of an African woman. Heaven is how do we get the sun. And since the Egyptians believe that everything is based upon nature, we have sunlight, we have moonlight. Balance. That balance, that man cannot exist without the woman. So, you're talking about nonsense. Throw out this Adam bullshit, of the woman coming out of the bones. What is that stuff about? I mean, it's just not even real. And you're asking people to suspend their sense of common sense to be able to look at these legends that come out of the Bible and say, okay, I'm going to go for this. This is faith. But I tell people, look, whenever you run across something in the Bible is an edited instrument. Some of you may believe that it's a word of God, but I have news to you. It was edited by men. And people have problems, and they put their problems on top of it. So that, yes, it may talk about human behavior in a very in a way that comes from observation, but then the next sentence could be about oppression, like Ephesus, 5th chapter, I think 6th verse. Obey your masters. The King James version is a corporate version. King James is the government. The government sent their missionaries and said, we got to enslave all these black people. So let's put something in here to say, you should always be happy that your oppressor is oppressing you. And you should not, get angry about it. I mean, the only person who will write that will be somebody who's oppressing you. So throughout this Bible, it's not a part of, the African religious. Book one, there's no such thing as original sin. God did not make mistakes. Everything that's here is here by design and on purpose. And the key to being a human is to reach perfection and enjoy the journey on the way there. And that journey does not have to be smooth. It's gonna be bumpy, but in the bumps is where your life become enriched and where you become a fuller person. So I know people who grow up on this notion of that we have to reject everything that God has put here, that the Creator has put here with us. They can't exist unless they narrow down their world. They can't open it up. And then by not opening it up, they miss all kinds of experiences that the Creator has put us here for. So my thing is that, one, yes, the religion that we follow is foundational. African belief is foundational in that. That's the point I want people to see. There's another point later on that I want them to see, that not only is it foundational, but what we have is the child and the grandchild offsprings of that original religion. And then if we can then think of ourselves and we can reclaim our agency of sacredness as African people, then we can go back and we can go through the glyphs. We can learn the glyphs and go through them and see what was left behind. Because, I think that the great thing about the ancient Cometians, Egyptians, very wealthy people, very powerful people. Tombs are only from powerful people. But they obviously knew that one day we would forget who we are. They knew one day we will forget our value. So they chiseled it in stone. They had it in papyrus and everything else. They put it in every possible medium they could put it in, so that one of those mediums will survive. And one of those mediums, we will then find a way to understand and come back to it.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And that's the thing that I find quite amazing, that it's not destructible, it's going to be here for another 2,000 years. I guarantee you that, and that's really a testament of the vision. And I think for me, like, one of the biggest frustrations is like, often, I don't know, I have strong feelings or emotions towards Egypt in the sense that when I walked into those temples, imagine we are getting what was left. Imagine in its full glory. I mean, it must have been like mind blowing, you know. And I remember when I walked in there, it was just such a, I don't know, it was an amazing feeling. It's almost like coming home in a strange way, you know. And but the thing that I realized is that even on the map, often it's almost like they often categorize Egypt as being part of the Middle East, and I find this to be like a joke, you know. And it's like, no, it's still part of Africa, however you want to look at it. But yes, of course, it was invaded by the Arabs. I mean, that people can dig in the history and really look at when the Arabs entered and so forth. But even the sort of the whitening of Egypt in the sense of like who built these things or who are this and who are that and so forth, that still needs to be dug through, and that still needs, you know, the truth needs to be revealed within it. But when you look at the emphasis on spirituality, it's quite amazing, you know, of for the sake. I mean, look at, for example, Lalibela. Lalibela is a spiritual space. It was created for a spiritual sort of a celebration and what have you. You look at Yaksu, even if you look at Yeha Temple, it's the same thing with Yeha Temple. You know, it's a very fascinating history within it. But across the Nile, all these structures, it's almost like they were speaking of the same thing, which is the divine. And I think, like in the beginning of your book, there's like I wrote down this one text that says, "We humans worship ancient memories in search of a divine future," and I found that to be so fascinating because that's where we are becoming disconnected. And now people are slowly trying to figure out, you know, what is divine order, you know, what is spirituality. This is why, like in the West and in the US, all of a sudden everybody's doing yoga and mantras and so forth, because they're looking for something beyond them. And for that, it's not something that can be scientifically explained. I mean, me as an Ethiopian Orthodox, I can tell you, you know, our relationship with Christianity is very different. You know, we were there from the beginning. You know, we were in the Old Testament, New Testament. We have our own Bibles, we have our own books, you know, and
you have books that's not even in our Bible.
Exactly, we have many books, clearly, and even when you come to the churches, these are not new structures that were built 40 years ago. These are ancient structures that were there from the start. But the way that we process spirituality, it's not a religion, it's a culture for us, and that's the big difference, I believe. And through that, it's like, you know, I always find it surprising. People have no idea. I mean, I'm obviously I'm gonna talk as an Ethiopian, but most people don't know we were really the first country in Africa to allow Islam into our borders. You know, we had Judaism, Islam, Christianity, you know, within our borders, living and coexisting. You know, I come, you know, on my mother's side, we come from the Lalibela area, from Lasta. And as you know, Wello, it's known for like this sort of peaceful coexistence between Muslims and Christians. So even in my own family, we have Muslims and Christians, you know, that we exist within it. But at the end, it wasn't the division. It was just what brings us together. And that's the key thing. And I find that your book to be so relevant now, you know, in the political climate that we exist in. And also, I think for history, sometimes we forget. And I think we need to continue remembering where was our starting point, and not to just romanticize about the past, but also, as they say, you know, you need to know your past to know where you're going towards the future. So through all of that, it's like, and we have to be able to document our own history. And you know, when I see the reliefs, you know, the Nubian reliefs, it's like I've never seen that before, by the way, until I was going through your book. But I found that so fascinating that, you know, as you go further down, you know, into Egypt, you see the beginnings and how it's sort of morphed over time into other things, you know, as it progresses towards the different regions. And in the case of looking at, I think you had like a section on ceremonies as well. There's a lot of things that we practice that are similar and different. But even through that, you know, when you look at the calendar, when you look at time, you know, when you look at, for example, in the Orthodox, we have female figures. You know, we have Mariam, which is like such a big figure for us, which doesn't really exist in certain Christianity because they don't see the relevance of that. But in that sense, I find that as I get older, and even a lot of my work, it's really based on spirituality, you know, and these are the things that sort of bind us. But also, as I was doing a lot of research for my own work, I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with the Dogon people of Mali. I mean, this group is able to see a star, in the sky that you can't even see with your bare eyes. You need a telescope. They know exactly the movement of the moons around it. I mean, this is quite fascinating. And then they say that the basis of that knowledge came from the Egyptians, So there's this connecting point as well, because I mean, we started somewhere, but we also migrated. And to just go back to one of your points, Africa has not taken a lot, has been taken from Africa, and people forget that, and still that continues to happen. So Africa has given a lot, to the world. There's a reason why philosophers were coming to Africa. Even when you look at the libraries of Timbuktu, I mean, these were like some of the first universities before even Europeans were, really established and so forth. But we have to speak about these things because often a lot of it is, it comes back to not just our identity, but it comes back to the sort of understanding that we are at the core of knowledge bases. We are really at the core of all these things that you see. Even for example, the Oromo people were like they established the first democracy.
Got a
People don't.
system.
Yeah, most people don't know this.
Right.
Even Ethiopians don't know this. So in that sense, it's like, when you don't know your own history, when you don't know where you come from, it's very easy to control you. It's very easy to guide you away from what is of value. And that's why, to me, even when I was living in Ethiopia, like, I traveled a lot in my own country because I found it so relevant that I have to go and see all these places. I have to learn as much as possible. To me, Ethiopia is not just Addis Ababa. To me, Ethiopia is the full country. But by the simple just movements and going from place to place, that's when I started hearing more stories and understanding more of things that you don't find in books, of things that are not written but are transmitted. And I mean, luckily for Ethiopia, we're one of the few countries that has a written language, our own language. So we have that record of history. And I think, that has contributed significantly to certain things. But within it, to me, I really appreciate, the effort that you've made in order to sort of create these connecting points. And I really hope that you will. Have you been back to Addis Ababa, by the way, or?
Not my last trip. I think was in 17. 17. Yeah, I think 17 or 18 because I spent 16 years going back and forth to Ethiopia to finish this project, and then I returned back to Egypt in 19. So I think it was 18.
Yeah.
I keep in touch with people, but most of the pictures that I photographed in Tigray are not because of this war, are no longer accessible from Addis.
Yeah. No, trust me. And I find that quite unfortunate. And even for me, my biggest concern is the preservation of all these different locations. That's what concerns me. And I don't even want to think about it, but it's quite disturbing, the what has happened so far. And that's the thing. I don't know why, but as Africans, we never seem to want to care of our history or our past or our relics, these kind of things. And I think there has to be like more effort. Even now, as you know, there's a big push for the return of the things that the British have stolen or whatever, the different Europeans. But it comes back to, we need governments that also appreciate these things and are willing to preserve them, because that is the history. I mean, when you look at European history is very well preserved. They make every effort to preserve, where they come from. But as Africans, I think this is something that we really need to work on. And I mean, thank God we managed to get our obelisk back from Italy. But as you know, it wasn't easy for them to install it, even it causing, some major issues on the land. But these kind of movements slowly will have to be sort of negotiated, I think, because this is where the future generation, you have to show something, and imagine across Africa, there's a lot of history that's either buried. Even in Egypt, they're still finding things, Ethiopia, there's still things being found. So, but documentation, that's why it's so important. And I think for any photographers that'll be listening to this, it's not just only working for money or only working for your fame and so forth, but the contribution is that we have to leave behind as witnesses of this generation of what exists, and also to make it a point to document, especially in Africa. We need a lot of documentation relating to the past. And I find that a lot of it hasn't been done properly. Not saying that all of it hasn't been done, but there's a lot to be done. This is why, Egypt has been documented like crazy, because there's a lot of people from outside doing that. But the same thing for Ethiopia and so forth. But even for Sudan, I haven't seen a lot of images. I think yours were the first ones that I started seeing. And this is why I think what we leave for the next generation is going to be very important. And as photographers, there has to be some, I don't know, I feel responsible to a certain extent to leave something behind, in one form or another. And I believe you, Chester, have done a lot of that. And I can only imagine, when you say you went through 40 publishers and, you couldn't get published. Hey, I mean, it's this is the reality of the game, The truth is much more difficult to get out there, But it's very easy to get out there. So I'm sure if you did a book on, I don't know, some suffering or whatever ridiculousness, you get published quickly.
Right.
As a New York Times photographer, how that was.
Right.
So and that's why, it's education is what it's going to come back down to. But this means that you're not waiting for someone, just as I'm not waiting for anybody, So if you have that passion, it's worthwhile to put the evidence out there, because in the end, it exists. And that's why, to me, I try to encourage photographers to publish as much as possible, because, once you have that barcode, that's it. That's your archive.
Right.
It exists fully. And now we live in the age of information. That's why this is so relevant, because we have a lot of information now, access to it, than before. I remember when I met you, I don't even think there was email, honest to God.
Probably.
Maybe there was AOL, I don't know. But I honestly don't remember. I remember we're still dialing phones and I had to pay a phone card or whatever to call you. But and this is why I think, for the listening audience, don't be caught up in your sphere of whatever, America or your neighborhood or what, you are the generation of information, meaning you have access to everything. I mean, the amount of information that's online now, even the most obscure thing you can find online. And this is where you have to go beyond your continent, beyond your city, to really dig and figure out. I mean, I know in my generation, I had to go to the library to find something. And that is if the book existed and it was published,
Right.
So even I remember during my Howard days, we used to go to Borders, we could never afford the books, and just sit there in the bookstore looking, suspicious as hell, just quickly trying to go through these books. and that's why, I really
knowledge.
Yeah, me.
Get that knowledge.
I would find ways, because there'll be people walking around trying to make sure that you're not. And sometimes what really irritated me is that when the photographers sealed their books, and so you couldn't open it. So it's just let me try to find something. But that's why, I say, you never know. I don't think you expected that feeling the spirit. I mean, it existed in the library at Howard, and that made such a big impact for me. It inspired me to do what I do today. And this is why I think publishing is such a relevant, and this is a conversation I also wanted to have with you, and to sort of emphasize publishing is such an important component. And I know you've made, I don't know, I think you made 4 or 5 books thus far.
Well, this is my 8th picture book.
Yeah, but you had, and you also had the one about Grace.
Elder Grace.
I don't know if you remember, I came to you on a shoot on one of those, the Jamaican ballerina lady or something like that.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
So
Marie Brown. I was Marie Brown or Marie something like that. Yes, yeah. She had a Caribbean group.
Better than mine. I just remember we walked into her apartment. I took a photo, and funny enough, I think that photo was exhibited at the National Museum of African Art.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Nice. But this is what I'm saying. The connecting points are quite interesting. So to me, it's really, the road is long and it's tough. I mean, I remember editors used to tell me that I had too many Black people in my portfolio. Crazy as hell. So this is why I was like, I'm done with the States. I think I need to be in Africa. So, but anyways, This is what I wanted to tell you.
Well, too many Black people. That reminds me, once when I first came to New York in '69, I think I met Gordon maybe '70, and I sat down and Gordon says, "Okay, what do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, Gordon, I don't like the image of my people in the media. You know, the issues of decency, dignity, and virtuous character. Those three issues are always missing." And Gordon said, "Well, okay, if that's how you feel, when you get an assignment from a white editor, there's 36 frames on a roll of film.
Right.
If you make 35 of them the way you're talking, that's good. But if you slip up and you make 36 the way they want to see it, that's the one they're going to use. So don't give them a choice.
Yep.
Let them go. If you got the assignment, they got the black and white contact sheet. They may look and see that there's nothing that they're familiar with, but that's a good picture. They're going to have to go with that. But it's not a picture because, you know, white people, white photographers, what I do is they sacrifice our humanity on our condition.
Yeah.
So immediately class comes in, race comes in, they just can't see. Their eyes fog up. And they go back to the old rigmarole of easy racist stereotypes. So we as photographers, we can change how other people see us by producing the images that they can't see, number one, codifying those images, as you say, in books or in our publications, number two, so that we broaden the whole landscape. So instead of it being here, we make them see around. And not only white people, but, you know, our people have been socialized by this too. That's why African Americans are so afraid of Africans, so afraid of Caribbeans. Why? It's like Malcolm said, who taught you to hate yourself?
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
No, but a lot of it is just this misinformation that's been spewed out for so long. I mean, really, if you look at, and that's why, you know, when I give presentations, I really speak about the power of the image, and it has, and these are two things that I said. The power of the image has an ability to form perspectives, and it has an ability to form perceptions. You know. And I think as people of color, as Black people globally, I think we have the worst end of the stick, because as a Black person, you can go anywhere in this world and the perception of how you're seen, it's ironically the same. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, I've been to China, you know, I've been, you know, all over Europe. There's all these places that I've traveled to. And this is why, to me, when you went to Gordon Parks, you know, that's the same reason that I wanted to get into photography, because as an Ethiopian, I felt like the image of Ethiopia was always like one-sided, which was very problematic. And granted, you know, I left at the age of 5 and I grew up as an Ethiopian immigrant. And really, like, the stories that I would hear from my mom about Ethiopia was completely different than what was in the media, you know? So, I mean, I grew up as a kid where when they asked me where I was from, I'm like, from Ethiopia. And they're like, oh, you know, did you have an elephant as a pet? Did you live in a hut? I mean, this is the most craziest things. And mind you, I have a name that is not Westernized. So imagine even that was a challenging thing. But through all of that, I realized, okay, this has to be sort of my mission. This might not be for everybody, but I felt like I have to do something that has a sense of purpose, what I felt very passionate about. And going back home, like, I felt there's a sense of urgency that, okay, I need to transfer all this knowledge. This is not saying I know everything. This is not saying I've learned everything. I'm still a student, but this was just to say, okay, this is what I know. Let's work on this. This is what I'm willing to share. And what has happened right now with photography coming out of Africa, it has changed dramatically. And to the point, I mean, imagine, to the point where the discourse has changed as well. And even if you look at what is in the rising market, it's mostly photographers from Africa, you know, that have really entered into the art world, where we found sort of our own aesthetics and we found our own way of sort of dispelling the things that was being done by white photographers, you know. And to me,
I love it. I on my Instagram feed, I do African photographers. I love what they're doing. It's incredible. It's a breath of fresh air.
But imagine, Chester, this is living in a continent where you have many challenges. And that's one thing I tell my students is that I'm not here to teach you to be like the best in the country. I'm here to teach you to be the best in the world, because now we are here to compete with the world. We're not here just to compete in our little countries and so forth. So, but obviously, in my perspective, in the context of Ethiopia, for example, my perspective is different than yours. The students that are on the ground, their perspective is different. But the more variety that we have, the fuller the image looks. And this is not about just showcasing the rosy pictures either, but it's about how do we document with dignity. And that's the big thing for me, especially when it comes to photojournalism, is that, as you know, Chester, poverty is so easy to document. I mean, right now I can just come to the US and I can just take photos of poverty. That's very easy for me. What's more difficult is what is the story behind it? What is the human aspect of it? And this is what bothers me when foreign photographers come to our countries, that they don't fully understand, that they only see the face of it, but not understanding what's behind it, And, at one point you were talking about culture. I remember we did this project with a school in Berlin where we had an exchange program. And what was really fascinating for me is that I wanted to understand, how does our cultural perspective affect how we document, So if you have a specific upbringing, a specific culture, a specific region that you come from, how does that impact what you see? And, granted, we have this idea that photography is a democratic tool. It's really not, because it's still on the leash of how do you say, the nuances of you're coming in without doing research. You're coming in, you're flying in without doing research, without understanding without understanding the culture. And then you think you know something, and to me, like, sometimes, I see images always of things that come about, and you have to remember, I've sat in all the juries, from World Press, the Sony Award, Lens Cult, all of that. When it comes to the continent, it's just, like, how, as a photographer, can you come to my country and you haven't done your homework? Like, how is that possible? And that's why that's the one thing that, especially when I teach your work, I say research is such a huge component to Chester's. A photographer is not just about image; it's about writing. All my students, they have to show up with a notebook, and I always tell them, carry a small notebook with you, because you have to also be writing at the same time, because like, it's a lot to say within that. And I can go on forever, but anyways,
I want to say, I'm very proud of you. I'm very proud of what you've been able to do with your eye. I'm very proud of what you've been able to do with your transferring skills.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very proud of the direction that you've given people who've come under your tutelage. Because as we dig into ourselves, as we change the message about ourselves, I believe eventually we will change the direction of the world.
Definitely. But you have to understand, like, I am at that point because of people like you. You know what I'm saying? It's really
I'm so fortunate to be that I was there to be helpful. As you know, one of my mentors, Romy Bearden, says what's important is the mission, is the message, not the person. But we have to pass it on to each other person, because this thing is so big that we need an army of frontliners.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody on full top max, firing away, not just one. We need a whole army of battalions. So I'm so happy what role I play.
It's I come from a culture where, there's like sort of a saying, your legacy is not about how much money you have in your bank account, but how many you've taken with you, and that's so important in that sense, because there's been key people in my life, you being one of them. Even there's a curator by the name of Simone Jami, what has been transferred to us, this is what we continue on.
Right.
And after I'm gone, you're gone. That's all we can hope for, is that what we have put in is just going to keep going on. And even now, like last year with the Black Lives Matter, my whole thing is we've been doing Black Lives Matter for a long time. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Black Lives have mattered to me since the beginning.
That's what I'm saying, But there's a time and place for everything. Things do change. And as you know, things don't remain stagnant forever. But in that sense, I think at the end, what I look at is, I think each, especially for photographers, is to really understand what is your intent. What is your objective in your career. Me, I'm not an elitist when it comes to photography. I mean, hey, you can be a great wedding photographer. I have nothing against that. But make sure that whatever you do, that there is a sense of purpose that you're fulfilling. It's not just about money. And even I tell the students, if you want to be rich and famous, photography is the wrong field to be in, because it requires a lot of dedication. There's a lot of us out there, but it's very difficult to come up. But that's why, as I started earlier, it comes back to your own personal truth. What is your truth? Because Chester, just as you are behind the camera, there is you in front of the camera as well, and that's what's reflecting back. And that's one thing a lot of people don't understand. We are artists, and we do exist in each frame.
And I take that to say, when I make I say a photograph never lies about the photographer.
Mm-hmm.
Because of what you're just saying. This is what's happening all the time. And if I want to know something about a photographer, I don't have to meet them. I just have to see their pictures.
Definitely. You can tell a lot about a person. Yeah.
Right. I've met them.
Most definitely.
Yes.
No.
But
it's
I'm glad that, the people discovering the camera. Once someone asked me, well, what's do you have an idol? And my idol has always been, since I discovered it, the Egyptian artist. Because the Egyptian artist was the first to use photographs in paintings, photographs in stone, and they were able to capture the spirit of things. And it wasn't too recently, as I start to work on my next project, which looks at the sacredness of ancient Egypt through the monuments and statues, is that, the enigmatic images of Egyptian statues. When you see a portrait, the portrait is looking somewhere. The portrait is not looking at you. And I've just concluded that I think what the portrait is looking at is the wave of time.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
At the horizon of time is where those portraits are looking at. And I said, boy, if I could get that, if I could figure out how to do that, that would be incredible.
Right. No, it's and that's the thing. It's just, I've done like some panels as it relates to business and so forth. And there's always, the artistic living or the creativity, as you know. I don't know if you've seen some of the interviews that I've given, but I say creativity is a spiritual manifestation. That's what I believe in.
Yep.
Creativity is not, it's not something you can calculate. Imagination is not something you can calculate. It's something that's sort of given to you, that you can't even control it. I mean, you can control the output of it, but you can't control it entering you.
Right.
So when you talk about these portraits, when you talk about these carvings, all these things that exist in ancient cultures, first of all, it's a highly sophisticated system in itself. And this is why, and this, often when it comes to art from Africa, it's always been in these museums categorized as primitive art, which I find so ridiculous because there's nothing primitive about it. And if you see all these objects, these are spiritual objects in which it's been created for the divine, And in that sense, I feel that creativity and spirituality, it's really connected at the end. And this is why these structures and these locations that you've documented, I mean, as grandeur as they are, it's really, as grand as they are, it's quite amazing that they were made in a time, they can sort of carbon date how long it's taken, blah, 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 and all of that. There's obviously time mappings on it, but there was no sense of, the level of dedication was, I think, pretty intense. Even when you look at the Pyramid of Giza, that's some craziness to me of what's inside of it. Who's the engineer? Even when I was in Luxor, I was there for the December solace, and imagine the science of the calculating when the sun is going to enter at this time to this hole, and it's
our people are great. and our greatness. We'll rip
listen,
peace with ourselves.
yeah, of course, but I honestly feel like as you have more technology, the dumber we become. Honestly, because you know, because we become so disconnected from, because everything's connected with nature. Because
Yeah.
astrology, it's a
Yep.
very it's a very connected thing. And I don't know if you've seen this book called African Cosmos.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yep. The Smithsonian African Museum put it out. I have
yeah,
a couple of pictures in there. Yeah.
yeah. So if you look at that book, it's super fascinating.
Right.
But again, it's a spiritual connection at the
Yes.
end.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Our people, Egyptians were great astronomers. They were great pacifists. They were great in everything. Mathematicians, spiritualists. That, as I said, when I went to this tomb, when I discovered this tomb of Unas, and write this down, people, UNAS, look, Google it. In the tomb of Unas, in Saqqara, I don't know if you went to Saqqara, the
Yeah, I did.
necropolis of Saqqara with the step pyramid.
Yeah, I did go the long. Yeah.
The step pyramid.
No, sorry, I haven't. I don't think I
Okay.
have. Yeah.
In the tomb of Unas, he has engraved in the stone 2 chambers in his tomb underneath the pyramid, 331 lines of Holy Scripture. And in this scripture, it talks about soul, faith, creation, ascension to heaven, spirituality, all of it. And this because we know when he lived, 2500 BCE. That is 2,000 years before the Old Testament may have been oral history. And that's 2,500 years before the thinking of the New Testament, which was actually written around 300 BC.
Right.
So every possible thing that you can think of in the language or vocabulary of spirituality was already invented. And we have that lesson in that temple, in that tomb.
But that's why for me it's like the whole point of and that's why I say this book, I think, is like it's an opening
Yeah.
to find more.
Yep.
You feel me? And that's how I see it as well. And it's really I mean, when I was in Howard, I minored in history, so I've always been obsessed with history.
Good.
I mean, I've been a historian, but
Good.
my life took me in other directions. But that's why it's so relevant to have this kind of content coming out, because right now, as you know, a lot of it's not about the richness. It's about what's missing.
Right.
But at the beginning, we were there at the beginning for many reasons, and even I hope, I mean, one day I can go to Sudan to really look at these structures, because I told you when I arrived in Luxor, it was like, I mean, we spent, I think like 3 or 4 days, and I did some photography there as well. But, and I don't know if you remember, like, there were like some, not the hieroglyphics, but they had some like writing that remind me a lot of like
the demonic.
Yeah.
The demonic, yes.
Yeah. So it kind of reminded me of the Yeha stuff. Like, so I was trying to figure out, was there a connecting point? Obviously, nobody can give me these answers, but I was like, oh, this is fascinating.
That's a good line of questioning there, because you're right. The demonic and what they call the Sabian does have an interesting script that's similar.
It's similar, and it's also similar to the Giz as well. Like, but like not a rougher, but sort of slightly different. But I saw some points on there, and I was wondering, I wonder what this has to do. But I remember when I asked the guys there, nobody could really give me an answer to that. But even when you go into these chambers, the wall, I remember you had the one with the stars, which you see existing in different locations inside the temples. Even stuff like that, I was like, oh, this is super fascinating. And even the you had an image of the Ankh. So I don't know if you've seen in Ethiopia, there's some women that have like the tattoo with the symbol of it's a cross, but then it has like the circle.
Interesting.
You remember these?
Yeah. I know the tattoos. I see them here, and I do see them in the hand, but I didn't notice that it had Ankh. I haven't come across the Ankh expression.
No,
so I'll look for that.
Yeah, no, to me, I've seen it on a few people. Even one of my cousins, I think, has that. And I was wondering, like, what is that? Because, even our traditional crosses, you can kind of see certain inceptions of it,
Right.
you know.
Right.
So, and I mean, obviously, there's the even inside these temples, you know, the swastika stick, it comes from Africa. It also exists all the way in Kenya. You know, there are many symbols within it. But that's why, like, as I was digging through it, I was thinking, wow, you know, there are these symbols that exist in 3 countries that that, you know, even even the Nubians, I mean, they look like us, you know. It's
They're your cousins.
yeah,
They're downhill cousins.
yeah, but that's what I always say to everyone from Egypt and these regions. That like we're actually cousins. We're not
Right.
really we're not that far away from each other.
Right.
I'm sure if we did the DNA, you know. I mean, I don't want to talk too much about Ethiopia, but I do want to say, you know, I mean, the beginnings in Ethiopia, so everybody comes from Ethiopia, whether they like it or not.
That's why I had to put Lucy in the book.
Yes, I saw that.
As well as a map of Africa.
Yes, thank you. I hope you didn't cut out Egypt, but
no, I wanted to show that Egypt is in Africa.
no, it's really crazy. But even when you, I don't know if you saw the most recent news that came out where they digitized the faces of the mummies that they found. I was like, are they really serious? Like,
you know, why is that necessary? Since they have left behind thousands of sculptures of themselves. Only reason that's necessary is because the Arabs hate Black people. They're trying to distance themselves away from it. They will even tell you that the wooden sculptures of Queen Tai is dark because the wood just got dark.
No, I'm telling you. I saw that news. I was like, what is this? I mean, you know, I'm not, listen, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a historian, but it looks hella suspicious.
It's foolishness. It's foolishness. But you know, when whites started doing, and the biblical archaeologists started coming across the Egyptian statues, what did? They started whitening them up. They started scraping off the color. So that
what about blowing off their noses? I mean, that I don't think that's accidental. That there's missing noses.
Well, and that too.
I mean, you tell me, is that true or like? Or is
it looks. I have felt the same way. I've heard lectures of how they have tried to explain it by by saying that this was an enemy who destroyed their nose because they didn't want their statue to live spiritually live again. That's bullshit too. But that's what happens when people start trying to cover up their critical race theories.
But wait a minute, wasn't it the British that blew off the nose of the Sphinx by the Giza?
Well, that's what people say. But before the British got there, the French were there. And the French were the ones who also had weapons, had cannons, and they were fighting the rulers at that time who were the remnants of the Turks. So the legend is that during a war maneuver, somebody used the Sphinx as target practice. Now, nobody's owning up to it, but it's kind of strange that of all things to be missing, it would be just the nose.
But that's what I'm saying. It's highly suspect that it's not.
It's highly suspect.
It's highly suspect. So
right.
I just wanted to ask you that.
The nose did not offend the Arabs who were there, the Turks who were there. But after the British and the French, somehow somebody got offended by the nose. But I tell people to look at the Egyptian statues, you may have knocked off the nose, but you did not knock off those full African lips.
Lips, exactly.
Those Europeans have those thin ass lips.
Yeah.
African people have full lips.
No. Anyways, so for this news, I'd be curious to know how they came up with this calculation of the skin tone. Me, honestly, ancient people, if you look at the Nubians, those are the ancient people.
Those are the ancient people, and they are and the Nubians are in the south of Egypt.
Yeah.
But the skin tones, this is what the Egyptian history is so broad. The Egyptians are indigenous African, it's an indigenous African culture that now, 3,000, 4,000 years into their living, they had fought wars. They had theological disagreements and secession disagreements that sometimes descended into wars. That's how we get the first and second and third intermediate periods. And then they were conquered. They were invaded. First by the Persians, then by the Assyrians, before the Macedonians and the Romans. Yeah. So when people talk to you about Egyptians, you have to say, what period are we talking about? If we're talking about the last 500 years, yes, white people were there. But if we're talking about the 4,000 to 5,000 years before that, no. It's the Pharonic culture is an African culture. Now, when the conquerors came in, they conquered the place, and then yes, some of those conquerors were foreigners, and they were white. But you cannot. It's whites love using politics to define the majority by the minority. Perfect example. There's no such thing as black Africans. You cannot be African and not be black. But they don't say, well, there are white Frenchmen because the country is half occupied by Muslims. So it's a difference here. So when you say the same thing about a short time period in the history of Egypt that white people had invaded the place, that did not make Egypt white. It's like you could ask the Native Americans, and did that make, your culture change because white people were there for 400 years? No. You have to look at who's talking.
I don't know. I mean, and that's one thing and this is what we're talking about. The information is so relevant in the sense that you can overgeneralize,
Yes.
And through that overgeneralization, you can set forth the perspective.
Right. And unless you know how to check that overgeneralization, you're a victim of it.
Listen, I took a screenshot. I sent it to my team. I'm like, what is this ridiculousness? Because to me, I was just like, even the Egyptians don't look like that. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
If you look at the current Egyptian, to me, that's not the features that they even have. If you're talking about bloodlines and so forth. But again, as I said, I'm not a historian, and I'm no what do you call facial reconstruction expert. But as an outsider, I was like, I don't know about this.
Well, this guy, what's his name? Zawas. He tried to get, when the King Tut exhibition came to California, he's the one who's behind all this. He tried to get them to put a statue of a white Tutankhamun in the show. Thank God there was a black assistant attorney general of California who understood its history, and he sued them by saying, you proved to me where King Tut was white. And if you can't prove to me he's white, then I'm going to sue you for putting this in the exhibition. They had to take it out.
Yeah.
You can't be, that's bullshit. You prove to me he's white.
But just the Arabs are not even white. I hate to say. I mean, I have a lot of Arabs friends. Like, even they're cousins to us. I mean, however they want.
Yeah, they're not white. They like to think so, and they don't know they're black until they come to America.
Well, yeah, but this is the whole thing. I mean, to me, it's I don't. But this is how all this stuff has been formed through this very precise way of communicating selected facts, and this is my main issue. And as you know, for us as Ethiopians, we don't really have a colonial history. Who we are is who we are within that, and how Ethiopians are at the end of the day. And that's what I find very unfortunate is the level of misinformation. There's two extremes. There's an outright lie, and then there's like an extreme fantasy. But my main thing is that we go back to facts, So, and that's the facts that we have to really look at more in depth. And you have to understand, going to Howard, I remember, there were a few students who were extremely into Afrocentrism, but they had the wrong facts. And they were telling me about Ethiopian history. And I told them, no, this is the wrong information that you have. I know you want to be all Africa and all black and all of that, but you need to be informed of the correct facts. And I don't know if you remember, like, the Holy Tabernacles and all that. They used to pass out like these leaflets and books and stuff like that. And I'm just like, where are they getting this information about Ethiopia? So, and that's where I think in this day and age, it's the accessibility of it is there, but now it comes back to what are we being taught? And remember, in my Canadian education, I think we spent our whole high school in World War I and World War II. Africa, I think we spent maybe a month. And that's even like Egypt, the beginning of civilization. And then even that, it wasn't Africa, it was Egypt. It wasn't like as if Egypt didn't exist within the continent. So that's why I find, like, in the educational system, starting from an early age, if we're trying to change these perceptions, it has to start at a very early age of shifting sort of this archaic educational system that exists globally. I'm not just talking about America, I'm talking about globally, even in my own country, there needs to be a change of sort of the educational system, because in the end, that's what plays hand in hand in, as you know, the political governance of the world, and how we're perceived. And even currently, before we started this conversation, I said to you, I'm not joking when I say Africa is the future. It really is, because there's a reason why multinational corporations are entering the continent. There's a reason why the Chinese are here. Everybody's here for a specific reason. And this is why I think even for African Americans, it's like coming to the continent is such a relevant part, not of just history. And I know there's African Americans who say, well, we're not Africans, we are Americans and so forth. Well, fine. If we have white people showing up in our continent just to find out and to see, there's no reason why you can't come and see things, So in that way, it's like we have to educate ourselves in a better way, and not to get caught up with what we think is history. Trust me, what everyone in the US has been, I always find it surprising when Americans think like the world revolves around them. That's not the case. You have a whole other world across the Atlantic, completely different. And I don't know any American, I don't care if you're white, black, whatever, who has not traveled and not been impacted by that travel. Even today, I feel that a lot of the messed up policies that come out for the world, that comes from the US, is because you have officials who have never really traveled, have never really been on the ground. You have a population that is completely unaware of what's happening on the ground, except they're being fed this information or what they think is the right information, So in that sense, this is why I think we have to be vigilant and we have to be curious beyond our comfort zone, regardless of who you are, But in the end, it also becomes back to the question of our humanity, we are here worrying about many things, but the environment is, I think Mother Earth is just going to kill all of us and then restart again. This is my theory. but I mean, look at the COVID time. It really brought the world to its knees.
And the COVID is nothing but biological warfare.
No, definitely. And remember in the beginning they said, "Oh, Africa is going to be a shit show," and I was like, "Okay, let's wait and see," because we have experiences with many things. We're not like sterilizing our immune system. And I think in the continent, when we start seeing all these countries shutting down, we're like, wow, these were places that we thought they were the superpowers. Because remember, we've had major issues with disease in the continent where we're always looking for help. Nobody was really trying to help us. And now everything comes to the door and everyone is panicking. And I just came back from Paris and I was just like, oh my God. I think I would have like probably gone postal if I stayed in lockdown the way that, all over the world it's been. But I think in this context, even during the COVID time, as Africans, we realize, okay, we're actually resilient people. I mean, you want to talk about a virus and a disease, trust me, you don't want Ebola at your doorstep. That's you know what I'm saying? But at the same time, it's like as Africans, we realize, okay, we did. And honestly, like soon as all of this kicked in, here in Abidjan, I was really surprised of how organized the government was and how everything was taken seriously. Like we were wearing masks from the jump, and then you couldn't enter anywhere, without wearing a mask, getting your temperature checked, doing the hand sanitizer. I mean, it was very systematic and orderly. And that's why our rates are very low in that sense. I look at not the infection rate, I look at the death rate, because you have to remember, we have other diseases. Malaria kills more people than COVID right now. So in that sense, it's often like we forget who we are as a nation, as a continent, and what we've endured, whether you're talking about slavery, colonial wars, all of that, but we're still here. And I believe just like those structures, we will continue to be here till the end. That's what I believe. I mean, I'm an Orthodox, so, they say everyone is coming to Ethiopia, everyone is coming back home. So
we are a worthy people.
Yes, definitely. But you will only know that when you know your history. That's so relevant. And that's why I find it so sad for African Americans, because a lot of the things were stripped, and a lot of the things were the core basis of who you guys are, coming from the continent. When all of that is removed, to survive that, imagine, I don't know a lot of people that would survive that. And that shows the strength of Africans. I don't think a lot of people even think of how Africans survived in America.
Right.
To endure all of that and to survive and to excel and to deal with all this crap and still push forward not only for themselves, but to push forward for the rights of other people. Like, I don't think people process that well, and to have the kind of impact that African Americans have had globally. Because right now, I mean, if you want to talk about culture, the most consumed culture globally is American culture. And guess what? American culture is African American culture. This is what people are consuming. So we can look at it at the most basic level. But in order to appreciate that, you have to know where you come from. So whether you came by plane or by boat or whatever, everybody came from this side, you know, and everyone did not come from the other side. You know what I'm saying? So that's why, to me, history is so relevant. And I like projects regarding history in the past, especially coming from photographers, because it also builds a connecting point, and the visual context is so relevant because sometimes people need to see it in the visual. I mean, you could have done a book just on text. As you know, there's a lot of research been done. I've seen your references in the back of the book. There's a lot that has been done, but it just hasn't been, you know, in a visual context, there aren't a lot done by it. So, I mean, within that, it's really, I wish you all the best. And I'm really appreciative of this lengthy work that you have. I hope you were enjoying the Ethiopian coffee when you were coming to us, at least.
Absolutely. Buna? Yes. But, you know, Buna kept me going.
No, that's our strength and power. So if you don't have that, you know, you ain't gonna survive in Ethiopia.
Right. And then I have American Buna every day.
Yeah. That's not Buna. That's water Buna. Yeah.
I know. That's the best I could do. Except I found a local restaurant that they have a Buna ceremony every day about 4:30 before they open. So sometimes I just, you know, happen to slip by at the appointed hour and ask for my cup.
No, I mean, I think that's the best way to drink coffee, in my opinion, not this machine. Oh, I mean, there's certain countries I've traveled to in Africa when I ask for coffee, they bring me Nescafe. I'm like, this is sacrilegious. I was like,
yes. What is this?
Wow.
That's just muddy water. Take it away, please.
No. I would rather drink muddied water than this stuff. I was like, oh, catastrophe, you know. And even when I traveled with my team, I remember we went to Kampala, and Kampala is, you know, they're all about teas, not coffee.
Yeah.
And we were like, we had to I was like, we need to find a way to get coffee. And it was virtually impossible. So after that, we started traveling with our own coffee because
wow.
You know?
Self-contained.
Yeah. I mean, you know, us Ethiopians, we're always traveling with our own things, you know, with our own spices. You would think that there's no, you know, when I come to see my dad in the States, you would think that there's no food in the States. And I'm like, Dad, like, why do I have to carry a suitcase of all these spices and so on? But it never ends.
And bring the injera. Bring the teff.
No, but you know, when I cross at the immigration in the States, the immigration guys have become like professionals of being suspicious of Ethiopians. Yes. Now they've learned all the words for all our dishes. You know,
they're looking for kid food.
That's what they say. You're like, you got kid food, you know? Or they ask you, do you have, I remember this one guy said, do you have sigawat, which is like meat stew. And I'm like, how does he know these words? And I'm like, oh, so you must have really learned a lot from us because, you know, certain things are not allowed. So, no. But I don't know. You've had shiro, right?
Yeah, love shiro.
Yeah. No, I don't know if you remember this one time when there was like
spicy.
Yeah, there was one time when there was this anthrax scare in the States, and there was this Ethiopian woman or something who came with her luggage, and the shiro it exploded in her luggage, and there was like a whole fiasco at the airport because they thought it was definitively anthrax, not realizing it's just So no, it's fun times to say.
I can see
that.
I can see that.
No, but I encourage everyone to travel in Africa to see the possibilities of Africa. And like I say, if the Europeans in the world is coming here, there's no reason why
Yeah,
those are
when
the
I think I was saying, when African Americans, when you travel to Africa, be not surprised if most of the people in your hotel are white. You
yeah, exactly.
or your resort are white. Don't let it
Yeah,
bother you. Get out
yeah.
of.
No, no. No, but but there's a lot to experience and a lot to see, and not just in the regions that you've documented, but throughout the continent. I mean, there's a lot of richness and a lot of connecting points. And as I say, through travel, you build character and it opens your mind. And this is, I think, I mean, even currently now that we have a lot of Europeans during the COVID time that came here, because since our numbers were so low, people just basically came here and start working out of the continent
Right.
because we have access to everything. So, and I think that has shifted sort of travel as well, of people realizing, okay, they need to get out from the jail cell of their homes. I don't know how you guys did on the lockdown. Me, I couldn't handle that. It's a bit much.
Yeah, it was difficult. We were lucky. We have a lot of space, and we had a grandchild, so there
Oh,
was a
granted.
generational thing. Yeah, so
Right, right.
but otherwise, when we walked out, we took all precautions, and we limited our movements, but we survived, and hopefully
Yeah.
we get past the Delta.
Oh, I don't know, Chester. It's not gonna end, huh? I hope nobody has this
Not soon.
delusion. Yeah,
Not
yeah.
soon.
But it's gonna be a hot minute before it ends. How
Right.
long was the Black Plague?
Several years. In fact, I went at the beginning of this. I went Google the Black
Hmm.
Plague. I forget, it was written by some guy. It's a journal
Mm,
in London,
mm,
and it was the nephew of the guy who wrote the journal, who I
right.
think his name is Daniel Defoe, who put
Mm,
it together.
mm,
Incredible. It was very humbling to read it. I tell
mm,
everybody, it's free on the web. Go read it.
mm. No, me, I suspect it probably like, I don't know, 3, 4 years. I mean, it's
Yes,
not ending this year. Yeah, at least 5 years is what I
I think
think.
it came in three. I think it covered three waves, so it may have been
Yeah,
5 years. Yeah.
yeah, but it is what it is. Okay, so I
Well,
guess we're wrapping up.
this is great. Thank you very much. It's so it's so good to know that you have taken this ball and you run so far with it, and that's the responsibility. And you've helped engage the Geo generation and the
Mm,
generation behind you, and arm them with the motivation to take that ball even forward. And as we dig into ourselves and dig into our history, there's so many great gems to be discovered and to exposed. And the world needs that information. Our
mhm,
people and our neighbors need that information. And we as photographers or visual artists or videographers, we're in a unique position to spread that. And
mhm.
I say to everybody, let's do it. Let's get armed with the knowledge and let's spread it.
Most definitely. I'm fully with you on that. So all the best. I hope that you will come visit in Abidjan as well
Oui, oui, oui.
for photos. And don't worry, my French is real.
Okay, okay. Definitely.
No, no. I mean, when I get pulled over by the cops, I speak in a hardcore Brooklyn English, so it kind of throws them off. So,
they, they say, who? What?
no, it confuses them, so it's better that way. So,
Well, when I was living in Senegal in 74,
hmm,
I could speak no French. I was trying to learn Wolof. So
right.
once a week, I would go read the Time and Newsweek magazine because it was in English, my mother's tongue. And
Hmm,
one night, I went to this hotel. I think it was hotel in Gorogoro.
hmm,
And I was sitting having my ginger ale on rocks, and I heard the music. And the music was this guy singing Isaac Hayes. And I went in, I looked, and he was dressed like Isaac Hayes. He was singing Isaac Hayes. And when he finished, I said, oh my God, I can go talk to somebody. I can have an English conversation. I run up to the guy on stage. I hit him on the back. I say, yo, bro, how you doing? He said, comment ça va?
No, no. Everyone can sing R&B here, or they can't speak it. So I find it so fascinating. Yeah, yeah,
The American culture, the American Black culture is so
yeah.
strong.
It's very strong, and
Very
that's
strong.
the thing. Yeah, yeah. And it's it's getting stronger and stronger is one thing that I realized, especially when you see it dominating the market, big time. So
look
it's
at
quite,
P Square.
yeah,
Do you see P Square? Yeah, I mean, P Square does it. I mean, it's
no, but it's, I mean, like I said, I think we started this conversation saying that the Nigerians are taking over, all the power to them, but I mean, this is what arts and culture is what's bringing us together, really.
Yeah.
And it's the main factor that is shifting how people see the continent or even African Americans, because you would have never imagined
Yeah.
the level of success could be reached, 30 years ago, if you really think about it.
I heard a Black American playing Whiz Kids.
Yeah,
on Atlantic Avenue the other day. He was just in his car. I said, "Wow,
yeah.
that's Whiz Kids."
But this is what I'm saying. It's the time is shifting for
Yeah.
all of this, and
Yeah.
and to me, it's
We're
even
finding
Burna
each
Boy.
other.
Yeah, and that's why for me, like living in Africa, which is unique because I've had the African American experience, by going to Howard and all of you guys in my life, and then also having the African experience. So I kind of exist in these sort of two layers. And if you remember, the first Addis Photo Fest was really the plan was to bring African Americans together with those in the continent. And you weren't there, but like Jamal Shabazz, I exhibited his work. He came, and it was super fascinating for him. And even like Dudley Brooks was there. There were all these photographers that coming up, I was like, this would be my dream. And that's been all I've been doing through the festival, is like my bucket list of like,
Good.
The dream team of like trying to bring the tribe together over time. So
they'll never be the same after they come on one of your trips.
Oh, definitely not.
They'll never be the same.
That's a definite guarantee, because remember, it's not just a festival for just Africans. It's an international festival, and it's not. There aren't a lot of, not because it's my festival, but I've been to many festivals. It's not a festival where it's most festivals don't have the diversity. That's been always my thing, and we're living in a global world, really. And through that global world, what I've looked at is I wanted to bring people from all over the planet, basically. So it's not every day that a photographer from Uruguay meets a photographer from Nigeria in one place, and to be hanging out. And you have a photographer from like Middle East, Asia, across the continent, meeting in one place to have conversations. And that's what I feel is that to make change happen, it's not just a one person thing. It's not a group. It takes a collective effort. So even through the festival,
it's like a visual Black World Congress.
Yeah, basically. I call it my tribe. I'm just building a tribe. That's a global tribe,
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So
That's right.
it's needed. Yeah. Okay.
Well, thank you very much. And it's true. The spirit is eternal, and it's moving through all of us. And thank you for being here at the same time that I'm here.
No, thank you so much. And as I said, I wish you all the best. And really, anyways, I'm not coming to the States, so you need to come to my side. So
okay.
I'm just putting that out there.
No problem. I got it. I love coming over to the continent. So hey,
it's just one flight from New York. Huh?
I know. I know. Yeah. I'm well aware. No problem. Yeah. Do you mind if I stop? You mind if I stop off in Dakar first?
No, you need to come to Abidjan first. Then you can go to them. We don't want you lost in Dakar.
Okay. Makala, we're ready for you. Come back.
Thanks.
Okay. Take care. Okay.